We'll start now.
Okay.
Professor Ming and dear participants, Namaste and good afternoon. Welcome to the NICE Economic Lecture Series. Through NICE Economic Lecture Series, we aim to invite eminent economists to discuss contemporary economic issues. Before we start, I will briefly introduce NICE. Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement is a research think tank registered under the Companies Act 2006 of Nepal, working towards bringing in research excellence in the field of international relations, international economy, security, and development, and looking for better approaches for enhanced international cooperation and relations for a better, peaceful, and stable world. For today's discussion on economic growth engine of China, we have Professor Ming from Shanghai Jiao Tong University, Shanghai, China. Dr. Ming is a distinguished professor of economics, director of the Shanghai Institute for National Economy, and research fellow of the China Institute of Urban Governance and Shanghai Jiao Tong University. He is also an adjunct professor at Fudan University, Singapore Management University, and Tongpei University of Finance and Economics. He worked as a Fulbright scholar at Harvard University and the National Bureau of Economic Research. He is a consultant for the World Bank and Asian Development Bank. His research covers labor economics, regional and urban-rural development, and the Chinese economy. As the head of the project, Professor Lu has hosted many provincial and national projects sponsored by the National Natural Science Fund, National Social Science Fund, and Ministry of Education. Besides, he has hosted international projects, cooperated with the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. Professor Lu has published several books and research papers in reputed national and international journals. Professor Lu's books, Labor Economics and Economics of Labor and Human Resources, were selected as important textbooks for 10 5-year plan, and Macroeconomics was selected as important textbook of 11 5-year plan by the Ministry of Education. Professor Lu's papers were published in foreign magazines such as Journal of Comparative Economics, World Development, Journal of Housing Economics, and Review of Economic and Wealth, and Chinese magazines such as China Social Science, The Economic Study, The Economics, The World Economy, and The World Management. Professor Lu has obtained National Prize for Distinguished PhD Dissertation, Shanghai Philosophy and Social Science Award, Humanities and Social Science Research Award for Outstanding Achievement in Colleges and Universities in China, awarded by the Ministry of Education. Distinguished Research Prizes of Human Resources Study, awarded by the Ministry of Personnel, etc. So Professor Ming, you have around 35 to 40 minutes to make your initial remarks, which will be followed by the question and answers. This session will be of 60 minutes, and the program is streaming live on several Facebook pages and social media platforms. We would like to request all our participants to tweet about the event and also share our live videos on their social media so that maximum can benefit from the discussion. The audience can drop in their questions under Facebook Live or in Zoom chat. Professor Lu, over to you now.
Okay, thank you for the introduction and the invitation from NICE to give me an opportunity to share my knowledge about the Chinese economy. And the title of my speech today will be the growth engine of the Chinese economy. Let me show my PPT. Okay. I will talk about the trend of the Chinese economic growth to give you a general view of the Chinese economy. And then I will talk about a very important issue, whether we need to treat China's slowing down of the economic growth like a new normal, or it's a structural issue. I will give you a closer look at the spatial dimension. I call it as the spatial misallocation. Before I start my details, I want to mention one thing. And I also want to emphasize it. China is a huge country. Never forget it. Whenever we talk about China, please always remember China is the size of China is like Europe. Okay, China is economically and politically one country, but the size is like a continent. So when we talk about China, we have to have a spatial dimension. We have the eastern part of China, the western part of China. The western part of China is far away from the coastal area. Okay, so please remember that. Okay, that will make us easier to understand what I'm talking about. So first, I want to show you the recent trend of the Chinese economy. Several years ago, the very famous journal Economist made a forecast of the US-China comparison. It forecasted that given the historical GDP growth numbers between China and the United States, China would have already caught up with the United States in terms of the GDP size in the year 2019. But now, you know, the time for us to catch up with the United States has been postponed because the Chinese economy's growth rate is now declining much slower than before. So what's the recent trend? This figure gives you a glimpse of the Chinese economic growth in the recent year. You can see that ever since the year 2010, which is just 1 or 2 years after the very famous, the recent round of world economic crisis, China's economic growth, which is in red in this figure, is now declining, especially in these recent 2 years. Also because of the shock of COVID-19, China's GDP growth is now slowing down very significantly. The question is, why? That's the key issue we want to answer. Is it a new normal? If it's a new normal, we need to believe that in the future, China's GDP growth will keep being slower and slower in the future. But if it's a short-run issue, for example, in today's talk, I will talk about whether this is only because of some structural issues in China. So if we can reform the institutions in China, we can remove all the structural issues from the Chinese economy, then maybe we have the possibility to have a higher economic growth in the future. So that's the key issue I want to discuss. Okay, now let me go on. Now let us review the general framework for us to understand a country's GDP growth in economics. No matter what school you belong to view GDP growth, I think for all economic studies, people know GDP growth is based on 2 sources. The first one is called as production factor accumulation, including the growth of labor or population, then the growth of capital, investment, including domestic saving and FDI. FDI means foreign direct investment. In a country like China, which is experiencing urbanization, how much land is urbanized to be used for manufacturing services for the urban economy is sometimes also included in manufacturing production factor. Okay, so that's one source. And the other source is productivity. In textbook theory, usually we say productivity is based on education and innovation, which I won't touch today because people know that innovation is growing very fast in China. But I don't want to talk about innovation. I will touch a little about education. But now let me mention one thing, which is called as allocative efficiency. In China, as I mentioned, China is a huge country. We are also a developing country, which means China is divided into 2 parts generally. One is called as rural, the other is urban. So how to move resources, including labor, from the rural area to the urban area, whether we can move these resources efficiently from rural area to the urban area determines the allocation of labor. And as also land, because urbanization means transferring agricultural land into urban use, right? In another dimension, as I said, China's inland area is far from the coast, but the Chinese economy is being globalized, which means we need to export China-made goods to all over the world. But the export from China to other countries is based on seaport transportation, which means the coastal area has the comparative advantage to develop manufacturing. But inland areas is far away from the seaports. The transportation costs for the inland area to develop manufacturing are very costly. So how to allocate resources between different regions is another issue in China. as a large country. So now, let us look at details. First, I want to mention one thing which is very important to understand China's issue is the population aging. According to the recent population census, the Chinese population over 60 years, the proportion is above 18%. And the proportion for people over 55 years is above 13%, which means Chinese population dividend has already been exhausted. If you look at the accumulation of labor force using a measurement, which is the working age population, let me tell you, the working age population, which means people between 16 to 60, has already been declining since the year 2011, which means the growth of labor in terms of the total quantity of the labor force is now actually shrinking. So later on, I will discuss one thing. If the total number of labor force is shrinking, how to allocate labor more efficiently across different regions matters a lot in Chinese economy. So the first issue I want to tell is the aging trend. And at the same time, unfortunately, China has another issue which is also related to population, which is our very low fertility rate. According to our recent population census, China's total fertility rate in 2020 is only 1.3. In the most developed region like Shanghai, where I live, the fertility rate is now only, maybe you don't know, only 0.7. Only 0.7, which means on average, a woman in Shanghai just give birth to less than one child in her whole life. So on the one hand, aging, on the other hand, very low fertility rate. So the growth of labor force in the future is very problematic. Okay, how to deal with this issue? Everything has a solution. I want to give you 4 things. Number 1, we are delaying our retirement age. I guess you don't know, the retirement age in China is still very low. Because China's retirement age was set actually just a little after the foundation of New China in 1950s, when China's life expectancy was only around 40. But at that time, we set our retirement age for women at 50 or 55, depending on your career, on your job. For men, it was set at 55 or 60. Even now, some of the women workers can retire at only 50. But our life expectancy has already been as high as more than 75. So how can this very huge difference between the life expectancy and retirement age sustain in the future? So in China, we are delaying our retirement age, which can help our labor force to grow, right? To more efficiently to use the labor force, potential labor force. Second thing, which is my emphasis, to urbanize rural people into the cities as workers in the manufacturing sector and service sector. Number 3, productivity. Productivity is related to 2 things. One is education, but the other, productivity can also grow if we reallocate labor force from area 1 to area 2, if we allow people to move freely. Finally, we are also encouraging childbirth, but I don't think it would be very useful to encourage women to give birth to more children. I don't believe it will be very useful policy. So I list it as the final policy tool. Now, let us look at saving and investment. In history, China is known as an economy which depends on high investment very much. If we compare China with other countries or regions, including China's Taiwan province, we will see that the mainland China's saving ratio is very high, the highest in Asian region. So this is also why the high growth rate in China relying on the high investment cannot sustain. So if we look at the GDP composition in the recent years, you can see that before the year 2010, I mean 10 years ago, you can see the blue part, which is the contribution of investment to GDP growth, accounted a lot in GDP growth. Some years, the proportion, the contribution of GDP, of investment to GDP growth could be as high as more than 40, even 50, which was too high. But in recent years, you can see the contribution of the blue part has been declining. So this is why we say that the domestic demand, especially the domestic demand from consumption growth, is now contributing to the GDP growth more and more. But in recent 2 years, because of the shock of COVID-19, the Chinese government is using investment as another tool for another time to boost economic growth. But that's a short-run issue. But in the long run, I think Chinese economy has given up the old pattern for economic growth, which relies on investment too much. Okay, now let us look at education. As I told you, education is a very important source for productivity. So if we compare our several rounds of population census, ever since 1980s, you can look at the first row of the number in the table, which means the growth of the national average educational years. You can see a very significant growth in the educational years in Chinese population. And the recent 2 rounds of population census, one is in the year 2015. The average educational years is around 8.5 years. And for the recent round, 2020 census, we didn't have the detailed numbers of the population structure, but the official report regarding our educational year, they reported the average years of schooling for 15 years old and above, which rises from 9 years to almost 10 years, which is a very fast growth. But I want to mention 2 things, which is not that optimistic. One is the growth rate. If you compare the growth of education in recent years to the historical record of the growth of the education in 1990s, you can see that actually the growth of the educational years is now declining. I mean, it's still rising. It's still rising very significantly. But if you compare the speed of the rise, you can see the rising trend is now going down. It's slowing down. Second thing is what I have to mention, which is called as the left behind children issue. Left behind children means that China is experiencing very rapid urbanization. People move from one area to another area for higher income. For example, the inland people are moving towards coastal area, including Shanghai, to have a better pet job, right? The wage salary here is much higher than the inland area. But the question is, we have inherited a planning system in history, which is called as household registration system, or in Chinese we say 户口 system, which means the migrants do not have equalized public services in the regions where they live and work, but they don't have the household registration identity there. It is quite difficult for the migrants to send their kids to public schools. So a lot of migrants choose to stay and work in large cities in developing regions, but leave behind their children in their hometown. But usually, their children are educated in very poor region. This is called as left behind children. The number is a huge number, which means the quality of education for left behind children is a worry in China. So this is what we need to improve in the future. So now, let me show you something related to what I'm calling as spatial misallocation. For me, this is the crux of China's economic slowdown, which is related to regional and urban-rural restructuring issue. Before I introduce the details, let me first talk about the economic opening. As I said, after reform and economic opening, China's economy has been involved in the very fast process of globalization all over the world. I also said globalization is based on export. Export is based on very cheap transportation by sea. So let us look at the map of China. China is a huge country, but remember, China is a huge country with only one side facing the sea. That's the coastal area in the east, which means for China, the geography of China is it's a large country, but only half of the area is livable. We have a line, red line on the map, which is called as Hu Huanyong line. Hu Huanyong was a geographer in last century in China. The Hu Huanyong line divided China into two parts. One is yellow, and the other is in green. The green part of China accounted for more than 90% of Chinese population, which is livable, which is plain, which is close to the sea. Okay, so only the coastal area, the east, has access to sea and has a comparative advantage to develop the manufacturing sector. And in the eastern part of China, please also remember another thing, which is also related to the huge size of China. The northern part of China lacks rivers. For example, the Yellow River. The Yellow River does not have the ability to transport goods because, compared to Yangtze River, Yangtze River is very wide and deep like a sea, but Yellow River, no. And in the northern part of China, the seaports are usually frozen during the winter, especially in the northeastern part of China, which is very cold, right? So in the globalization era, only the southern part of China has a comparative advantage to manufacture goods and export them to the rest of the world. So that's the geography we have to mention in my talk. So how does Chinese economy look like? In recent years, I use big data of truck flow and coach flow to describe the geography of economic activities in China. You can see those lines. Those lines on the map means the relationship between a pair of cities in China. The lines mean truck flow or coach flow. So you can see what? You can see again the Hu Huanyong line, right? The economic activity is much denser in the right part of China. That's the eastern part, right? And you can also see city clusters like Jingjingji. Changsanjiao means here, I mean Yangtze River Delta, Pearl River Delta, and also Chengdu, Chongqing in the western part of China. You can see city clusters. And you can also see what? You can also see the central role of those core cities in different regions, in different city clusters. So here I want to show you high economic agglomeration because China's economy has been modernized. Right now, let us look at how do people flow. It's quite natural that people pursue higher payments, better job opportunities. So people move to the areas where they can get highly paid jobs, right? So in the recent population census, our team calculate the population growth in each prefecture level cities. You can see what? The red areas and the orange and yellow areas mean they have positive population growth. Where are they? Except some minority regions in the western part of China. In the majority Chinese people's region, in the coastal area, you can see only the coastline, the provinces on the coastline, and the regions around large cities, they absorb people to work and live there. But the other regions, like the northern eastern part of China, like those smaller cities, far away from the large cities, actually, they're losing population Because, let me emphasize again, because people always choose to move to the regions where they can have better payment. Okay, and let us look at some details. The second map is for the description of population change at even more detailed level, at county level. You can see what? The concentration of population is even higher than left one. For example, in the northern part of China, you can see that in northern part of China, only 3 large cities have population growth. But in the right map, you can see what? Even in some prefectures where the population growth is negative, like here, Harbin, you can see their central areas, central urban areas still have positive population growth. So this is because of what? Let me summarize. The population growth, population redistribution across regions is because of the globalization and modernization of the Chinese economy. Okay, so this is reallocation of labor force. Now let me move on. Okay, you can see people are moving towards urban centers. Now, let me show you one thing. You may ask me, in this era of globalization, how important is location? Here I show you a figure. This figure correlates 2 things. The horizontal axis is the distance to major seaports in China. The vertical axis is the size of a prefecture level city's GDP size. You can see very clear negative correlation. The farther away you are from the seaports, the lower the GDP size is, which means your GDP growth potential, GDP size, depends heavily on geography. And the correlation between these 2 variables can be as high as almost 40%. Okay, but during the globalization process and modernization process, market forces allocate resources, including labor. The question is, China is a very traditional country. China has also had a very long period of planning system. A lot of economic resources are actually controlled by the government. So having the idea of equalizing the distribution of economic activities to balance regional development, the Chinese central government actually tried in history to move resources using their regulatory policies to move their resources to the inland area, to the small cities to try to balance regional development. Okay, in other countries, maybe people cannot do that, but in China, the central government still controlled a lot of resources. The first important thing is land. Okay, so this figure shows you what? Shows you the inland provinces inland Chinese provinces share in urban land resources supply across time. You can see that before the year 2003, the inland provinces share in land supply was declining. Why? Because people moved to the coastal area. But after the year, which is called as a turning point in regional policy, you can see the inland provinces got a lot of land use quotas to urbanize their land. And their share in the land supply has kept rising. For what? To build a lot of industrial parks and new towns, new cities, to accommodate the ideas to develop the urban area to accommodate more people, more factory. Okay, frankly speaking, in short run, this helping hand can really help the inland area to build up, to converge different regions' income disparity. But as time goes by, ask yourself, we are moving resources to where? To regions we can have a higher return to investment, or to regions where we can have only lower investment return. I guess you can understand, we are actually using government regulatory policies to move resources to regions where we cannot have high return. So the allocative efficiency of economic resources are actually going down, which is a very key issue for you to understand why economic growth potential is now going down and slowing in the recent decades. Okay, and let me show you some figure. We collected data sets from all the Chinese cities. We find that among the cities which we can find numbers, more than almost 300 cities, okay, more than 200, actually more than 270 cities had constructed new towns. Please don't forget that a lot of Chinese cities are actually losing population, but they are still building new towns. Okay, and more than 70% of the new towns were actually built after the year 2008, because we used our 4 trillion plan to boost the economic growth, especially to boost the economic growth in the laggard regions. And another problem is the new towns were very huge. The average area of the new towns being built was more than 100 kilometers squared. And the population size planned for the construction was also very huge. The average population planned for the new towns was more than 400,000. And besides, they were built very far from the old cities. On average, their distance to the old city center was more than 25 kilometers. So low density, far away from the city center, then no return. And result is very high debt over GDP ratio. Now, let me show you the regional distribution of the new towns being built. You can see the darker colors on this map represents those regions where they have built a lot of new towns. You can see a lot of new towns were actually built in the northern eastern part of China, western part of China, where people are moving away, as I told you, right? And another thing, which is also very special in China, which means the Chinese local government wanted to maximize their GDP growth. And where to get money? They borrow. They borrow from the financial market. And how do they borrow? They open a lot of financial companies opened by the local government, and they inject the land as assets to the government, to the company. And the companies use the land as collateral to go to the financial market to borrow. So in this figure, I want to show you that there are 2 bars. One is blank, the other is in orange. You can see the construction of the planned new towns grew very fast after the shock of the world economic crisis in the year 2009, right? You can see they almost doubled, and then doubled again in 2010, right? And then declined after 3 years. Why declined? Because the local housing supply were not sold out, lacking of demand in those regions where population was actually migrating away, right? But at the same time, you can see this line. This line is the number for low government debt. You can see as they build more, the debt is also going up. But as I told you, because a lot of construction was in the inland area, they didn't have the dragging power to, boost the economic growth. So this figure is a measurement which measures how much GDP you can generate based on investment. It's an elasticity. You can see only the coastal area, which means this region, the left-hand side means the regions closer to the major seaports. Right-hand side means the regions far away from the seaports. You can see only the coastal area has high return to generate GDP. But as I told you, the resources are allocated by the government to the inland area, which is far away from the seaport. So the result is what? The result is the inland area not only got land use quota, but also got higher and higher debt. This is inland area's share in the total country's government debt. You can see also a rising trend. Only in recent years, when the central government realized that, oh, this is not good. We need to control the growth of the government debt in the inland area. You can see in recent years, it's declining, but they used to have higher and higher debt share in China. So then we give you a measure, which is debt over GDP ratio. Debt over GDP ratio means if it's high, the debt is not generating GDP. So you can see what the western part of China have very dark, very deep red color, which means very high debt over GDP ratio. I also draw an arrow, which points to the inland provinces, which is very typical. In Guizhou, Guizhou is one of the poorest region in China. The debt over GDP ratio is also very high in that region, right? So this is, as I said, for a large country like China, the whole economic growth story is a geography story, okay, which refers to the allocation of resources across different regions. So if you understand all these things, let us talk about reform. Let us talk about hope. Okay, for me as a Chinese, I always say that in China, if we know what is the problem, then the problem, when it's a problem, it's a problem. But when we find the solutions to the problems we have are also the hope in the future. So very fortunately, in recent years, a lot of things are being reformed. For example, let us summarize what I'm talking about in today's talk. What we see is the accumulation of production factors is now slowing down because we have the failing demographic dividend because of aging and very low fertility rate. We also have overinvestment and falling returns to investment. Land urbanization is very fast, much faster than population urbanization. It's a waste of land resources. Okay, a lot of problems occurred in the inland area because people are moving away, right? And total factor productivity, which is related to allocation of resources across different regions, I also saw that we experienced deterioration of resource allocation efficiency after the year 2003, which was the turning point of regional policy issue. Okay, so how to deal with these things? First, because the total number of labor is shrinking, so let us allow freer labor mobility, including children, right? Which is to utilize labor force more efficiently. When children are allowed to move freely, they can have better access to quality education in large cities, in better developed regions. Okay, for investment, can we move more investment in alignment with population? Right, only in that way we can have higher return of investment, including infrastructure. Right, for land, let me ask ourselves: do we choose to build in the regions where people are moving in, or we choose to build in the regions where people live? Of course, the first. So in the future, let us build more in the regions where you can accommodate more people to supply housing, right? And finally, this reallocation of resources can improve efficiency of resource allocation across different regions, including education, to urbanize left behind children, right? Now, people may worry, if we allow free mobility of labor and other economic resources, how to pursue balance across different regions? Let me show you. What do we mean by balance? Balance of what? When people talk about balance, they always mean balance of GDP size. But what I want to mention is balance of GDP per capita. Okay, now let us compare three large countries. In the middle is the United States. Right, Japan. Left, China. Okay, we have three lines for each country. The red line is the Gini coefficient of GDP size between different regions. You can see in the United States is very high, high concentration. The blue one means concentration of population. High concentration of GDP, also high concentration of population. So ask yourself, how should GDP per capita be? Unequal or equal? Look at the dashed line. The dashed line is the Gini coefficient of GDP per capita across regions in the United States. Free mobility of labor allows for high concentration of GDP together with high concentration of people. So GDP per capita is actually equalized. So balance of regional development doesn't mean balance of GDP size, but a balance of GDP per capita. Now let us look at Japan. The same. High concentration of GDP, high concentration of population, but their GDP per capita across different regions is equalized. Now let us look at China. China's GDP concentration is not that high, only as high as almost Japan's. But what lag behind is our concentration of population. You can see our concentration of population lags behind concentration of GDP. So GDP concentrates in some regions. People does not follow. So our GDP per capita difference between different regions is higher than United States and Japan's. But the good story is what? Look at our blue line. The blue line is going up slowly because it cannot be very fast, which means what? People are moving towards the places where they have higher concentration of GDP. So look at the black line. The black line, which means the Gini coefficient across different regions in terms of GDP per capita, is actually declining. But we still need time. Maybe 20 years, I don't know. Maybe 30 years. Our GDP per capita difference between different regions can converge to the level of United States or Japan's. But we need time. We need time. But the policy implication is what? It doesn't mean we should stop migration, but we need to reform our institutions to allow freer migration. So now let us look at the recent reform. In the year 2019, which is a very important year, we had the so-called fifth meeting of the Central Committee on Finance and Economy. At the meeting, President Xi Jinping said, we need to adjust and improve the regional policy system according to the economic law to give full play to the comparative advantages of different regions and promote the rational flow and efficient agglomeration of various production factors. Okay, and this is to enhance the economic and population carrying capacity of advantageous areas such as central cities and city clusters. And we also need to enhance the functions of other regions in ensuring food security, ecological security, and border security. And in those regions, we don't need to have too many people living there, right? Because the GDP size is very limited. And to equalize the life quality of different regions, we need to ensure the bottom line of people's livelihood and to promote the equalization of basic public services and create balance in terms of GDP per capita during development. To deepen regional cooperation mechanism, China needs to build a unified and open and competitive and orderly market for commodities and production factors to increase market integration and also development. And for land, we need to improve our flexibility of land management to give the advantageous areas more space for development. Of course, for those underdeveloped regions, we also need to have more fiscal transfer transfer payment for the poor regions, especially those key ecological areas and major agriculture areas and poor areas, for example, mountainous areas. And in recent years, we are pushing ahead integrated market and production factor market reform, especially by building an integrated market. In March this year, just 2 months before, the central government declared that we need to enhance the building up of an integrated market across the country to allow more efficient interregional allocation of resources. Especially in land management system, we need to allow land and land use rights or quotas under our system to go with people migration. And for household registration system, we need to deepen reform, especially in the large cities, because for medium, small-sized cities in China, the hukou system has already been free. So the last step is to deepen the reform in large cities like Shanghai to allow freer migration and also to equalize public services within the city, between the local residents and the migrants, and also across different regions between the poor areas and the rich areas. So the whole country will be developed with higher quality in the future. So that's all for today's talk. I hope that you can understand Chinese economy's trend better, and also the hope we can have in the future based on continuous reform in our systems. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, unmute. Okay. Professor Ming, thank you so much for the comprehensive and interesting presentation on economic growth engine of China. We have learned a lot, and we have also received huge number of questions. So let me allow participants to ask questions directly, and I have also received some questions from chat and through registration. So first of all, I will ask participants to directly put your questions to you.
Okay.
Mr. Kin Wang, so you can ask questions directly to Professor. Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Professor Ming, for your very interesting and very informative presentation. I am from Mandalay, Myanmar. This morning, I had a discussion with my fellow friend from Union Academy of Social Science. Thank you. You know more than I do, politics, economics, and ethics are closely intertwined. And yesterday, the World Bank Group President David Malpass made a comment. The war in, I quote on him, the war in Ukraine, lockdown in China, supply chain disruption, and the risk of stagflation are hammering growth. For many countries, recession will be hard to avoid. More than that, he also made a comparison in 1970 global economic scenario. And you being economics, what is your assessment on the World Bank president's remark that I just got? Thank you.
I think if we talk about this issue 2 months ago in March, I think few people in China, including the policymakers, realized that the lockdown in the Chinese cities, including Shanghai, would have had this heavy influence on the global economy. Maybe people think Shanghai is only a city, a small fraction of Chinese economy. But during these two months, as the data shows, I think all the Chinese peoples have now had a consensus that Shanghai, the city like Shanghai, is very important beyond people's imagination because of production chain, not only within China, but also all over the world. So I think in May, in early May, I can observe that the policies concerning the COVID-19, I think has been changed. And you can see that beginning from June the 1st, Shanghai city is now reopened. Although there is still some small areas in Shanghai still being closed, but the major area of the city is now being reopened. And at the end of May, the central government launched a very large-scale meeting across the country, telling the local government officials to boost the economics using every effort to restart the economy. So I think China's system is very efficient politically, which means that if they don't realize the problem, maybe their effort would be to deal with the COVID-19 issue. But when they realize the economic issue now, because the numbers in recent years concerning GDP growth, the taxation growth is now dropping very significantly. So now they realize the problem. So in recent days, I can observe that every regions, I mean the local government in every regions of China are working much harder than before to boost economic growth, to make it normal. So I think the worry you have, and in the future, I think it can become much better. What we need to worry is now in Shanghai is we do worry that maybe some companies are still worrying about the uncertainty of the policies in the future. But even for the uncertainty of policy making in China, in Shanghai, I think the local government leaders are actually aware of that uncertainty. So this is also why you can see from the media that the government officials are releasing some information to convince people that the Chinese economy will be stabilized. So I think things are much better than before. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lu. Let me ask another participants to put his question. Avinash, are you there? Mr. Avinash, are you there? Yeah, you can ask your question.
Thank you, Professor, for the insightful presentation. I have few questions. My first question is, China, how does China plan to use 2/3 part of China for its economic growth? Because mostly the Xinjiang province, Tibet, these places are like very sparsely populated, and it's mostly hilly or mountainous region. So how does China plan to use these part for its economic growth? So that's my first question. My second question is, recently there has been talks about internal debt crisis in China and exaggerated GDP growth rate. So I would like to know your comment on that. My third question is, China has been promoting 2-child policy or 3-child policy recently, right? But there are a lot of people who do not plan to even like have one child. They're disinclined for even having one child. So how the Chinese government planning to motivate these couples to have more than one child, or 2-child or 3-child? And it will take around 2 or 3 decades for these newborns to be part of the labor force, right? So what plan Chinese government have for 2 decades to propel their economic? So I have these 3 questions. Thank you.
Okay. Because the voice is not that clear, I'm trying to understand what you are talking about. But if I didn't understand you correctly, please forgive my weakness in hearing. Okay, let me try to answer your question. Starting from the childbirth issue. Okay, we have a very long history of one-child policy, as you know, right? But in recent years, ever since the year 2015, we allow for 2 kids in the urban area. In the rural area, policies have been always different. In the rural area, if the first child was a boy, then you are not allowed to have the second one. But if the first child was a girl, you are allowed to have the second one. And actually, the regulation of the one-child policy in the rural area was not that restrictive. So for some of the rural areas, especially in the poor areas, a lot of people had actually 2 or even 3 or even 5 children, could be very possible. Okay, minority people, I mean, except for Han people, the minorities didn't have any one-child policy restriction, never. Okay, but ever since the year 2015, people are allowed to have 2, which means the urban areas are allowed to have 2 children. In recent years, people are allowed to have 3. Okay, but as you said, people don't want to give birth. I'll give you an example. Like in Shanghai, the fertility rate was only 0.7 according to the 7th population census. But we need to distinguish 2 reasons from each other. One reason is universal. The other one is very Chinese. The universal reason is people are getting rich. Everywhere in the world, when people are getting rich, people don't want to have more children. So that's normal. For this kind of reason, if you look at Western European country, if you look at Korea, if you look at Japan, no hope. Almost no hope. You can subsidize people, you can encourage people, you can say that you can have a leave from job for 3 months when you have a child. People say, no, I don't want to have children. But the other thing is Chinese style. In China, especially in large cities, let me mention Shanghai again. Shanghai is a large city, much richer than other regions. 2 things are very expensive. One thing is housing. The other is education. For housing, as I told you, ever since the year 2003, we encourage construction in population losing regions. But on the other hand, we restrict the land supply and housing supply in the coastal area, including Shanghai. For education, although we have a public school system in China, but the supply of education in terms of quantity is very limited. So people need to compete for education. Number 3, the supply of housing and education access are actually linked. Because in China, we have a very, 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 very special policy, which means we rank people's rights to send their kids to public school, especially high quality school, according to whether you own a house or rent a house. Understand? If you don't buy, you're only a renter. Sorry, you almost don't have opportunity to send your kids to high quality schools. Which means what? Which means to raise a child is very expensive in China. This can be reformed, and it is being reformed. Understand? In recent years, especially since the year 2020, the Chinese central leaders said that we need to give different regions different policies for housing supply. Those regions where housing prices are already very expensive and population growth is very high, we need to build more, especially to build more rental housing to accommodate young people and migrants whose income is not very high. And in the future, for those renters, we need to gradually remove the difference between renters and owners to access education. That's one thing. The other thing is to build more schools in those large cities where the population size is very huge and still rising. Different regions are doing these things at different pace. I have to say that Shanghai is not that good. We're very reluctant to provide more schools. But Guangzhou, look at Guangzhou and Shenzhen. They're making more efforts to build more schools. So these two things are becoming better. Okay, that's for a second question. For the first question, for those minority regions where population size is not that large, how to develop? Let me first define what is development. Development is always an indicator for per capita measurement. For example, income per capita or GDP per capita. So we need to distinguish what do we mean by development. We're talking about the size of the GDP or GDP per capita, which means GDP over people, over population. So for those inland regions like Xinjiang, like Inner Mongolia or Tibet, because their geography is not that good, far away from the seaports, as I said. But never forget, they are also very beautiful. And the territory, the area of the province is very huge. For example, Xinjiang. Xinjiang is only regarded as one province, but Xinjiang's size in terms of area is 1/6 of China's total area. So it's very huge. So these regions have the comparative advantage in at least 3 things. Number 1, agriculture. Xinjiang is very strong in agriculture, including, for example, cotton. Second, tourism. Xinjiang, I really like Xinjiang. I really like Tibet. Number 3, natural resources like oil, like mines. But these 3 industries, their GDP size is limited because agriculture's GDP is limited by land area. Natural resources given by the God. Tourism is limited by the capacity to accommodate tourists. But when GDP size is given, if you have limited population, or even people are moving away, you have a shrinking population, GDP per capita can grow. So by which I mean what? For those regions, you don't choose to invest in the industries where they don't have comparative advantage, like chemistry. You do 2 things. First, you invest in the industries where they have comparative advantage. For example, for tourism, you have them to build an airport. For agriculture, you build a road to transport agriculture goods out. Right. And then at the same time, you encourage modernization and the scale economy for the production of agriculture and tourism to increase GDP per capita. Second, this is also the thing we need to do to help them. That is to help them because the GDP size and taxation is limited, to help them to improve their life quality, including building more schools, hospitals, roads, high-speed railway to connect those marginal regions with the central and developed regions. Okay. That's my answer to your first question. Thank you.
I have one more question. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear, but not that clear. I can try. Please, go ahead.
So my third question was, recently there has been talks about internal debt crisis in China, and the GDP has been exaggerated. So I want to know your comment on that. The internal debt crisis and the exaggerated GDP growth rate.
Internal what crisis?
Debt crisis.
Debt, right? Debt, yes. Government debt, right?
Yes.
That's really problematic. That's really problematic. How to answer this question? This is really a tough question for me. The central government is doing the following things. Number one, to limit the growth of local government debt. The central government is now trying to put a hat on local government debt growth, saying that you are not allowed to borrow more because the Chinese law does not allow the Chinese local government to borrow directly from the financial market. So they can set a ceiling. That's the first thing they can do. And it's being done. The second thing is to borrow by the central government for the local government to reduce the cost of financing. Because now the local government borrow a lot, but at the cost of the market decided interest rate. The interest rate is very high. Could be as high as more than 10% a year. Too expensive because it's commercial. The central government is saying that you don't borrow that very expensive debt. I borrow for you. Even if you are not allowed to borrow directly, I borrow for you, which means the financing cost can be reduced drastically. And this is why you can see in my PPT, do you still remember that after the year 2017, the debt over GDP ratio is declining for the inland area? It's because the central government is now borrowing for the inland area. That's number two. Number three, for some areas where the debt cannot sustain, actually, telling you the truth, the provincial level government and the central level government are actually paying back for the local government. But this policy in China, as a socialist country, as a united country, has some side effects. One side effect is moral hazard. The local government will expect that you're paying back for me, so I borrow again. Why not? Because you will pay back. The central government realized that. The central government is telling the local government, I'm paying back for that now, but not forever. In the future, one day in the future, I will stop doing so. Okay, I'm only rescuing now. Okay, so that's the information the central government releases to the local government. But you know, there is a trade-off between removing moral hazard and the short-term social instability. Because if the central government removes moral hazard by saying that you're not bailed out, I won't pay back, you know, the local government will go bankruptcy. That's very dangerous. So there is a trade-off between these two things. The central government is, for me, they are just like dancing. It's an art for me. It's an art to trade off between short-term social and political stability and the long-term removal of moral hazard at the local level. Okay.
Thank you, Professor Lu. I will ask another participants if they have questions. Dr. Shalini Shikha, are you there?
Yes. Am I audible?
Yes. You can turn your video.
Okay. Hello, Professor Lu. Thank you very much for the enlightening lecture, as well as for the very comprehensive responses as well. They also have been very informative for us. Professor, I would like to get your comments on the efforts of Chinese government that has been trying to create a regional balance in the Western China, the same Xinjiang region that you were talking about a few minutes ago. So we know a lot of investments have been put in. Pakistan is involved here, and of course, it is a great geopolitical challenge for India as well. That's why I'm asking this question from you. That the access to Gwadar port and the whole establishment of China-Pakistan economic corridor amidst the various geopolitical and social tensions in the region there has been related to the Uyghur Muslims, and you name it, there are a number of ethnic problems as well. But what is your take on China's economic gains in this part? I'm talking about economic gains from CPEC. Is it still viable, or what are the projections or the economic gains that the experts have been contemplating at the present time? Thank you, Professor.
Thank you for the very excellent question. When I'm trying to answer your question, let me emphasize two things first. First, again, China is very large. When we talk about inland or using the word west, please always remember that the west part of China or inland part of China is very huge. Okay, when we talk about the west, we don't mean only Xinjiang, Tibet, which is close to Pakistan. Sometimes when we talk about west, Chengdu, Chongqing, Yunnan, Guizhou, Guangxi. Guangxi is a coastal province, but in the west, they are all west. This is the first thing I want to emphasize. The second thing I want to emphasize is what I'm talking about today is not a choice between yes or no, but to what extent and where and how. Okay, now, based on these two things, let me answer your question. First, when we talk about West, I totally agree that we need to also consider geopolitical issues, for example, to cooperate with Pakistan to open a corridor, and which is also an opportunity for the western part of China, especially those minority regions. I totally agree. But what I'm talking about is, even if I agree that we need to invest in Xinjiang, Tibet, these regions, but to the right of the Hu-Huanyong line, do you still remember the red line? On the right-hand side of that Hu-Huanyong line, we also have regions like Guizhou, Yunnan, Sichuan. For these regions' development, it's not related to the issue you raise. And some of the regions are in the mountainous area. The construction there is very, very costly. Do we need to accommodate that much people living there? Or we need to consider how to reform the institutions to allow for more migrants out of those regions where the livability is not that good. The opportunities for them to develop the manufacturing sector is very limited. That's the issue what I'm talking about. Okay. Second, even if we want to balance the regional development, what I'm questioning is to what extent, where, and how. If you ask me, do you agree we need to have the inland? I totally agree. I totally agree. But what I'm talking about is maybe we need to consider the investment is too much. For example, what do I mean by too much? I said, if we invest to build an airport to help them to develop tourism, I think it's right. If we invest in high-speed railway to connect regions with the coastal area, I also agree. But do we need to open a factory? Sometimes the factory is polluting in the inland area. For new town construction, as I told you, some new towns are being built in population losing region. For example, I'll give you a very small story, very short story. I visited a county in Guizhou province. Guizhou is in the mountainous area. In that poor county, a national level poor county, the time when I visited there, their population was only 50,000. Remember, 50,000. But their planned population is 6 times, 300,000 in a mountainous area. Do you think this is too much? Okay, this is only example. Okay, second, where? Chinese central government is now choosing some central cities like Chongqing, Chengdu, Xi'an. They are all western part of China to build up metropolitan area to accommodate more people and more industries, which means what? We are helping the western part of China, but we are helping the western part of China to develop their local engines of growth, if we are talking about growth engine of China now. Which means what? Which means the western part of people, they do not need to stay in rural area or the mountainous area. They can also move to the local central cities to enjoy modernization. So this is where issue, right? And then how? Let us choose, for example, we have $1 million US to invest in the poor region. The question I raised for how means we need to make a choice because the resource is limited. Do we choose to build a road to transport agricultural goods out and to build an airport to bring people into the western part of China for tourism? This is one choice. The other choice is to build an industrial park with very wide road. Let me emphasize again, because the resource is very limited, we have to make a choice. If you make a choice, what do you choose? Let me tell you, because the local government in China has a very strong incentive to maximize their GDP, because it brings, at least in short run, it brings tax revenue. Let me tell you, the Chinese local government in general, they choose to build an industrial park, but they don't like to invest in, for example, public services, schools, or they don't build enough infrastructure. In my example, the road for agriculture activities or airport for tourism, because agriculture and tourism for them are not generating enough GDP. These things are what I'm talking about. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you, Professor Lu. I will take one. We will take one more questions. The time is already past. So, Mr. Bishal, you can ask your questions right now.
All right. Thank you, Sunil sir. Thank you, Professor Lu Ming, for your insightful presentation on Chinese economy. My question is, no doubt China is a mature economy, but its real GDP growth has been declining significantly from 14.2% in 2007 to 6.6% in 2018, and it's even projected to fall in the near future as IMF projected. And my question is, China has been referring to it as a new normal. And is it because China failed to embrace new models of economic growth that relies less on fixed investment and exports and focus more on adapting new sources of economic growth, such as innovation, private consumption, and services? Is it because that? Thank you, sir.
This is a wonderful question. I thank you for asking this question. Let us distinguish different problems in Chinese economy. Okay. First, new normal. When we use the word new normal, we refer to the following things. First, within China, at least two things are new normal. Number one, China's population dividend has been exhausted. No hope to have population growth continuously. That's one new normal. Okay. The second new normal, domestically. According to economic theory, when the country is climbing up, the growth rate should be slower. So these two things are domestic new normal. The second new normal is international. Because we used to have very, very heavy reliance on export. The contribution of net export to China's GDP growth used to be as high as 9%. But for us, when we have trade surplus, for other countries, they will have deficit, right? This is not sustainable. So after the year of economic crisis, now China has almost trade balance. We still have a little trade surplus, but the trade surplus in recent years, our contribution from trade surplus to GDP growth is now around only 1% compared to 9%. So this is why China's leaders say that in China, we have two circulations, mainly domestic circulation, because international circulation only contributes to 1% now. So we have these new normal. Understand? Second, that is not normal. This is what I'm talking about. Understand? What I'm talking about is what? In history, China's old growth pattern was not normal. We relied too much on investment, expansion of cities, heavy industry, export, very low consumption. So now we should reform our system to change our growth pattern to another way, which is what I mentioned in today's presentation, which relies on what? Let me summarize again. For labor, free migration. For land, we build in the areas where people go, rather than in the places where people live. For investment, the previous question asked about the question about debt. We don't allow the regions where they don't have returns to growth to borrow, but we allow more investment in the areas where they can grow. For those regions where they have already bought a lot, I'm telling you, don't borrow more. And in the future, I won't pay for you. Understand? So for production factors, including labor, land, and money, these resources will be allocated more efficiently in the future. This is what I'm emphasized. Plus, one thing I don't touch today, because it's easy for us to understand, that is innovation. So in the future, two things are becoming more important. One is more efficient allocation of resources, plus innovation will become the future engine of China's growth. I hope I'm clear. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Ming, for insightful presentation. And we would also like to thank our participants and audience for their wonderful questions. We still have lots of questions, but due to time constraints, we are unable to take all of them. So once again, thank you, Professor Lumi, and have
Thank
a
you.
nice day. And see you
Thank you
all
for your
our
visit.
upcoming
Thank you.
events. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.